So I feel like it's twofold, right? Maybe the market sentiment had shifted slightly and institutions and the ETF flows mirrored that side of the flows, but also on the institution specifically, they're very much interested, and we've seen this over the last few months, that they're very much interested in these tactical plays, with the basis trade being a significant one. And if that compresses, I think it's actually now around half the average of last year. It means that the appetite for institutions is a little bit smaller in the near term. But I think it's also worth zooming out. People worry, do we really see institutional adoption, or is that just something that we're saying, right? But if we zoom out, I think we've seen a gradual increase in institutional participation. And maybe with the recent 13F filings, you also have some nuggets of information that you'd be willing to share.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think as Max highlighted, despite the recent outflows that we've seen in the market, 13F reporting was due last week, and it highlighted quite a positive trend within the growth of the institutional holders across the past year since these ETFs launched. We've seen essentially a 3x from Q1 to Q4, which is quite significant. Institutions are now holding about $31 billion worth of spot Bitcoin ETFs. And that number is, as we've seen last year, is growing at quite a significant rate. The largest percentage of these owners are hedge funds, which is a group, as we mentioned before, one of these sophisticated market participants that's taking part in the basis trade and is finding these very interesting tactical opportunities to enter the market, which they make up about $13.8 billion of that $31 billion figure there. So quite a significant portion.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I think for people on the call who that may be wondering, compared to non-institutional, compared to retail, I would say that the pie has stayed the same. The proportions have stayed the same. It's around, I would say, 30% of the holdings are institutional holdings. But as that pie grows, so does the portion that is belonging to institutionals. And we do expect that pie to grow significantly over the year, right? We've seen just how much institutional adoption has picked up over the last year from the 13, but we've just generally seen how much demand and how much appetite there is for crypto ETPs worldwide, generally speaking. If we just take a step back and from the US spot ETF launches last year, these assets, these ETFs have accumulated over 110, 120 billion in assets in just one short year. And they've actually overtaken the gold ETFs in the US when it comes to assets under management. And when we think about the demand and supply dynamics, they've actually accumulated more than double the supply of Bitcoin that was issued in the last year. So all of this is a very favorable outlook, I would say. But do you expect institutional adoption to slow from here, or what do you think, Michael?
No, I think quite the opposite. I think this is still very early innings, especially for not only this asset class, but also these instruments. So I think our outlook is that institutional adoption will continue to increase, especially as we're hopeful that the assets available to these institutions continues to grow as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And of course, we've got to remember, right, that like the US market is a very important market, but it's still not the only one. And we may see other institutional adoption in other key markets as well. And I don't know if you have the data at hand, and I may be throwing you under the bus here, but we did have the opening up of the spot ETF options, the Bitcoin spot ETF options in October, November time, which actually, as you mentioned, is particularly interesting for those more sophisticated players. It lets them set up tactical plays like the basis, but also among others. And so do you see a lot of demand for the spot ETF options as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think demand has been extremely strong for those options and is continuing to grow. In terms of the volume number, I don't have it offhand, but I want to say it's around $6 billion a day in notional trading volume on the options. Obviously, these are just another instrument for institutions to, hedge their exposure or create synthetic exposure or really do a whole host of things with structured products. Yeah, I think this is going to continue to grow as well. We're quite bullish on that kind of that product structure.